quick karakia. Kia ora tātou. Nau mai hara mai whānau, pai ki te a koutou I tēnei pō. I tēnei pō I noho ana tātou mai te taho ngā rangatahi, I mahi ana I roto I te mahi mātai hinengaro, tēnā rā tātou. Ko ai au, ko ripika wari ana hau, he uri a hau no ngā rauri kitai, ngā timania poto, te raroa, te aupauri, me ngā puhi nui tonu, he mātai hinengaro e mahi ana I roto I ngā hohipera. Kia ora rā. Me tīmata mai tātou I roto I te reo karakia. Kia tau. Tēnei te aro o rangi I tuaki nei. Tēnei te aro o papatua nuku E takoto nei. Tēnei te aro o rangi rawa ko papa E takoto nei. Kia rau te tapuai o tāne ki runga. Tēnei te pō nau mai te ao. Karangatia rā te ao E piri. Karangatia rā te ao E tāne. E piri E tata, E piri E tata. Whakamaua kia tīna. Tina, haumi e hui e taiki. Kia ora anō. It's really my deep pleasure to introduce our rangatahi here tonight and to introduce the kōrero about wellbeing for rangatahi during this time. So I'm just wondering if we can maybe do a quick round to introduce ourselves. If we can start with you, Kerry, and then maybe if we put down to you, Api, and then to you, Logan, if you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself, perhaps a little bit about the mahi or the study that you're doing and a little bit about where you're from. That would be really nice. Kia ora rā.
Awesome, thank you, Bex. Kia ora tātou katoa, he uri ahau o Kaitahu Waitaha ka te Māori, he tauira ahau o te whare wānanga o tākau, ko Kerry Kupa Toka Wikua. Kia ora everyone, thank you for joining us, and it's nice to be here with some friends as well. I'm a PhD student at the University of Otago, doing some mahi around pūrākau and wellbeing, and I'm also a clinical psychology tauira as well. So I'll pass it on to you, Logan.
Tēnā tātou katoa, ko e tēnei noho nei, I tāu tōku pāpanga mō Ngāti Rangi ahau, nō reira ko rau pei te maunga, ko ngai he te awa ko Ngāti Rangi te iwi, ko Ngāti tunu ki te hapu, ko maunga rongo te marae, tāu tōku māma no Ingarangi me ko te rano ko tupuna, hei tauira ahau I te whare wānanga o Tāmaki, Makaurau, kei te whai o te mātaurangi I roto I te mātai hinengaro. So I'm Logan, I'm studying at the University of Auckland, doing my PhD looking at the experiences of young Māori men growing up in the city. And that's what I'll share for now. So I'll pass it on to Api.
Kia ora, kia ora te whānau, ko Ngāti Parau, ko tō ārangi o Aotearoa, ko Api Takuingua. Yeah, kia ora guys. So hailing from the East Coast, Ngāti Parau, currently part of the RNZAF, so the Royal Air Force here in New Zealand, just in the middle of my registration to be a psychologist in Defence Force.
Wow, it's really exciting. Yeah, no, again, it's a real pleasure. It's a real pleasure to have you guys on tonight and to be kind of sharing from your perspectives how things have been going for you during COVID. And you know, also I'm really mindful myself working in the hospitals, the pressure that's been placed on our students during this time because study's been uncertain, you're not sure whether you're coming in, you're not sure whether you're staying home, you're not sure that, you know, and where I'm based, we see a lot of nursing and medical students, and I know that their programs have been really through a process of upheaval during this time. So I'm just wondering if you fellas might want to, you know, just give us a little bit of feedback about how that's been for you guys and how you've been able to navigate that process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, you go first. I could start then. That's cool. I guess for me, I'm involved with the Tuakana program at the University of Auckland. So that's an equity program for Māori and Pacifica students. And it's been a really challenging space to navigate. And I can only speak to the University of Auckland space. But you know, it was, especially with the first lockdown, it was really challenging because it was so unexpected. It was so quick, and then we kind of didn't really have any idea about, you know, what it would really look like in the space. And we kind of know that it really impacts Māori and Pacifica whānau so heavily when we kind of have these shifts. And when it comes to essential workers, the majority of essential workers are Māori and Pacifica, and they're not necessarily in the hospital spaces, but, you know, they're at Countdown, they're, you know, delivering packages, they're collecting the rubbish and all of that stuff. And so we had lots of students who had to pick up extra work for whānau and things like extensions on assignments, but also having the time to do assignments was like huge. And so it's like when I was tutoring and things like that, it was just like always just like giving space to people and like recognizing that study is important, yes, of course, but you know, well-being and your whānau are much more important, and you know, they're going to be around forever. But you know, this study program is 3, maybe 4 years of your life, and it's having that perspective and kind of putting that out there, because I've had like a bumpy journey at uni in different programs and haven't always had the best grades, especially in undergrad, and like having those narratives that people can share where it's like, you know, this is a semester in your life, it's 12 weeks or it's a term, and so if you get through that and you're able to get to the next step, then kei pai.
Well done. So the tuakana program, just so that people are aware, is based on the tuakana teina model, hey, and so that requires you to sit in somewhat of a leadership role. Hey, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I coordinate within the School of Psychology. So any Māori and Pacifica student at the university will be picked up and will be enrolled into a program at the University of Auckland. So I have a list of all the students within the School of Psychology, and then we have mentors. So those are the tuakana who will help out in each of the different courses. So if you're having challenges with understanding the coursework, want extra support, want a place to hang out, then we basically provide that. We, in the first lockdown, we have like a pantry essentially in my office space where we stocked up all this food for this semester. And within like the first 3 weeks, we went into lockdown. And so we made it little care packages and we sent them off to different students who indicated that they, you know, maybe might need some kai, and we had some grocery vouchers and countdown vouchers we put in there just to kind of help out in any way that we could. So basically we just try and do whatever we can to help out, internet access, stuff like that.
And I think a lot of the roles in terms of you know, stepping into, particularly in that student space, those types of leadership roles, is, as you said, is not just about academic performance for a lot of our tauira, you know, a lot of our students. It is about, you know, making sure that they have the necessities they need to get through the day, and then they have the resources that they need to do the mahi at home. And if they don't have that, that they have the support that they need to just kind of be through this process. So thank you for sharing that. We've talked a lot about narratives, and I know that the research that you guys have done, that's been really important. And I just I'm wondering if one of you might be able to give a little bit of a kōrero or a definition about what narratives are, because I'm just aware that it's a little bit psychology speak, and sometimes whānau don't, or, you know, like, so, you know, we kind of throw these kupu out there, and we understand them, but I'm just wondering if you can tell us a little bit, perhaps Carrie, maybe if you can share a little bit about what narratives are from your perspective, given that your research is focused on that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right, it's a word we chuck around and can be a little bit difficult to define, but I suppose it's the way we make a story of things. It's the way that we link together different events that are happening, so we can create a narrative around. So Logan spoke of his experience, you know, at university, linking events together and how we link those and what that sounds like. So you could link two things going on happening, and you could kind of frame it in a negative way. So you could say, you know, I went to uni and I got bad grades and I'm a bad student or I'm not intelligent. That would be a really negative way of making a narrative about that event. Or as Logan said, you know, he said he went to uni and he got some not so good grades, but then he found a program he liked and now he's doing better, and that's a way of framing it in a positive way. So when we talk about narratives, it's the way we link events in life and kind of create a story by doing that. And I think Logan gave a really beautiful example of that.
Kia ora, thank you. And if we kind of look a little bit deeper at narratives as well, in terms of some of the whakapapa kōrero that we were talking about the other night, that they can be narratives that link back to what we call our pūrākau, our creation stories, and those kinds of narratives, the narratives of our tipuna, and that whakapapa kōrero, or the original instructions, or the layers of stories that we have in our tipuna stories, I guess, essentially. So thank you for that, kia ora. Api, is there something that you'd like to add to this kōrero based on your kind of experiences of?
Yeah, I think, you know, I guess just really sort of tautoko around a little bit what Logan was saying earlier about study being a moment in time. You know, like I think when all this sort of went on, especially when it kicked off, and I'm thinking that first lockdown, you know, and there's a rush to hand in assignments, there's a rush to do that, and a rush to do this. I mean, I know I wasn't the best undergrad student. I certainly failed a paper or two, you know. But you can make that up, and it feels so all consuming, and it can feel so stressful, and it really is just about jumping on also what Kerry said, you know, that reframing, it really is a moment in time. It's a bit of a second, and while, you know, maybe that might require a little bit of hard mahi later, that's something we're all sort of used to, I think. You know, that's nothing new. And even just the brief bits I know about your journey, you know, Logan, like it's all good. Yep, there might have been changes and fits and starts every now and then, but it gets there when it gets there. And I think having a little bit of that distance on it, you know, and that gap, and seeing where it is. I got a younger cousin over at Massey studying engineering, I think it is. And he was just talking about the intense pressure that these first years are putting themselves under to put themselves through. And it's a little bit like, hey mate, like honestly, if you fail, no one's going to realize that at the end of your degree, no one's going to be asking you, oh, hey, why did you do that? And people in general are pretty understanding, you know. I really think that people get that this is a difficult, uncertain time. So I think, thinking back to some of the kōrero that's been on here around sort of well-being and stuff like that, it's about being a bit kind to yourself. Yeah, we talk heaps about being kind to others and things like that, but it's also about maybe just being a little bit more gentle in yourself, you know. And I think Māori in general, we talk about it quite hard on ourselves. We set ourselves high bars, we set ourselves high goals, and then when we don't reach them, we get quite disappointed. It's about sort of taking that disheartenment and understanding that, hey, that's okay. We can just carry on.
Kia ora. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's really important kōrero because, you know, as you're all aware, when you're off to university and there's so much expectation that you place on yourself, and perhaps that sometimes comes with the expectation from whānau, and then you just start to create those levels of expectation. So it was actually a really nice way to lead into the kōrero, Logan, by, you know, allowing ourselves to go easy, to take time, to be aware that things will pass. And, you know, and again, if I kind of link that back to some of the kōrero that we've been having about Māori tau and realising that that's on a continuum and you might fluctuate through those states of Māori oho and Māori noho and then coming back to Māori tau. What are some of the ways that you guys have seen being helpful strategies for navigating that space for yourselves and for your whānau?
I think for me, when I was in the first lockdown, one thing I did was like, I guess like I have like a creative, I'm a creative character. I like making like different creative things. So I made a lot of memes during the first lockdown. Like I had this like commitment where I like posted a lot on Instagram, like engaging in like different things. Like sometimes it wasn't all that serious. Like I think I just found like making people laugh or like having people kind of like connect, like and maintaining connection with like different whānau members and friends during level 4 was something that I found very powerful. And then when it came to my research, I was meant to be doing interviewing. I was meant to be talking to people face to face, kanohi to kanohi, because that's kind of what we like to do as Māori researchers typically, is that face to face wānanga. And I wasn't able to do that, and so I had this kōrero that I transcribed, that I'd typed up word from word, that I'd done with high school students, and I made poems and like did like lots of creative things. Like I really drew on kind of creativity that we have as Māori, and I guess part of that is around like wairua, and like maintaining that kind of connection to other people and kind of having this creative channel I found to be really powerful for me. And it meant that I kind of felt like I was able to kind of keep doing things. And there's kind of that Wairua aspect and kind of the emotions that you're able to put into creative outputs that I found really healing at a time when we weren't really able to see whānau. So that was just my individual thing, yeah.
Kia ora. That's a really lovely narrative and you know, a lovely way to, if we think about mahi toi in the whatitara model that we've been talking about, and you know, kind of reflecting back on lockdown itself and the output that Māori had, you know, being in lockdown, because we are highly expressive people, and sometimes it's expressed through performing arts and so on and so forth. And so that's a really lovely way to connect that kōrero to what was helpful for you. Is there anything you guys wanted to add to that kōrero before we move to the next part-time?
Yeah, I think a bit for me, it's interesting that you said Wairua, because as soon as you were thinking that, I was like, man, I don't think I've ever run so much as I did in lockdown. And for me, that's what I felt was my sort of creative expression, you know. And I was out there, and I ended up doing all these challenges with my mates and all this stuff. So sort of, I guess when you look at it on the surface, it looks real different from what you were up to. But all those things you were saying really resonated with me. I think that Wairua, that little bit of control, that sense of stillness and peace, and that for me was, yeah, I mean, I guess also joy is coming to mind, and that for me was just that running around, that having a little bit of competition with my friends and finding a way that I could create that whanaungatanga, even though we couldn't be doing it like we want to and like we used to, right? Kanohi ki te kanohi, that's what we're used to, that's what we want to do. So yeah, I guess finding ways around that. And for me, that was doing that sort of running and those exercises.
Kia ora. And I think they're both, you know, really beautiful expressions of how we can connect with whānau during these times. You know, that aren't like any other times that we've had whānau kōrero. Terry, is there anything you'd like to add to that kōrero?
I suppose the only thing I would also add to that is just being aware that, you know, being a rangatahi, or that time of being a rangatahi, is already a really unsettling time as it is before COVID. So it's really a time of transition, whether that be throughout schooling to university and to mahi, a lot of new relationships, whether it be intimate relationships or just new friends. You know, it's already like that, and I think COVID really just exacerbated or made that uncertainty and that newness a lot greater for young people. And I think like there's some things that we can do, like practicing karakia is a really great way of settling and being mindful, or learning karakia. I'm aware that for some people that might be not a settling process if they're just learning their reo. Going outside, as the boys have already alluded to, is really important, and just making sure we're aware of our routine as well. During lockdown, it's really easy to lose our routine, our sleeping patterns, our eating patterns. Simple things like that are really important. Monitoring our screen time, engagement in social media. So just being really aware that you have a routine during the day, and connecting that routine to other people's routines can be a really helpful way of keeping accountable. So that's what I would add.
Kia ora, thank you. So, and again, loving the diversity of the kōrero tonight. It's really refreshing. So we've got a really lovely pātai actually from, I think, and Pūrākau always changed in their retelling. They were adjusted for the audience or their purpose. How does this fluid understanding of narrative mesh with the Western model of medicine and the fixed nature of diagnosis? So I guess for me, narrative therapy has been, you know, it's one of the traditions that psychology was based on traditionally as a therapeutic intervention. Was if we look at some of the earlier models of psychology to if we look at some of the earlier models of psychology to the ones that we're seeing now, which are sort of third, you know, I think we're even maybe moving into fourth generation wave therapies, where we're seeing a lot of them being amalgamated with cognitive behavioural therapy and DBT and all of those kinds of things that we're seeing now. If we go back to some of the earlier models, they were based on narrative, on telling stories, and the importance in the healing process of telling stories. And those methods aren't just a Māori method, but they are in most populations around the world will have their creation stories, and we all go back to those narratives. I think, you know, like Christianity is one of the most powerful narratives in the world. And so I think if we kind of think about the etiology, I suppose, of narrative method. All peoples across the world have a history of narrative, and I think one of the things that we see in terms of medicine is that it has its own narrative. And one of the things that, for me, I suppose, as an Indigenous psychologist, is how do I still use our narratives in the context of a hospital setting, like the one that I'm working with, and be able to maintain the integrity of my creation stories or my whakapapa kōrero in that space. And I think it's a delicate dance, because we are heavily trained as psychologists and we spend a long time learning psychology, but we've been Māori before we've been anything, is kind of my experience. I was born in a very strong Māori family, but a Māori family who couldn't speak Māori, but were very Māori in how they were and their ways of being. And just, if you walk into my whare, it's not unlike walking into a marae. You can expect to take your shoes off. You can expect that you will be thrown tea and coffee and kai down your, whether you're hungry or not. These are the expectations you will get in the house, right? So very Māori ways of being, and you can't separate that from the way that you practice. And I think for me, I guess in response to that question, the ideal is can we bring whatever it is that we're bringing into the room, along with the knowledge that we are learning in the process of becoming psychologists. Pehe o koutou whakaaro kia pēnā.
I would say that my reaction to that question is simply that they don't map easily onto Western models of medicine, and that's because I truly believe that our pūrākau and our healing practices give us so much more than Western medicine could ever give us, and they allow us to see context, they allow us to see a lot more about human nature than our diagnosis system could ever tell us. They allow us to explain how certain characteristics are developed in the way a diagnostic system it doesn't potentially do for our people. So I do believe there is value in some of their Western models of medicine, but I believe there is an immense amount of benefit that we can get from our pūrākau, and the ability to take both for both of our people and to move forward and simultaneously be able to do that, I think is where we really have power, and our clinicians that have the ability to be able to do both, they are the people that I want to be working with, our people.
Well done.
It's funny when I saw that. I mean, I don't know if it really answers the question, but all I could think of was I did this interview for my thesis where I looked at the relationship between mana and leadership, and I was talking to one of the kaumātua and talking about fluid storytelling. He linked Maui to being a Jedi, and I loved it and I cracked up. But I think the one of my favorite things about that was then that was later linked in to these really Western models of leadership, and I talked about how this model of leadership that we're experiencing, that we exist within, and that we conduct and are part of, is actually this really high level distributed leadership. And and it's sort of, it made me think a lot about there's not really a lot of new things under the sun, and sometimes we've got to look backwards to go forward. And there's a beautiful whakatauki that I can't remember the exact words by Dr. Rangi Mātamua, where he talks about a new way of doing old things, and that for me sort of sums up that, and those are some of the thoughts around there.
Yeah, I think mostly I just try to talk about what everyone said, but I think as everyone's said, it is really difficult to balance the two in terms of whakapapa kōrero and Western models of medicine and diagnosis. They don't seem to connect in any meaningful way at first glance. But I think a diagnosis is just a story, and it's a way of making meaning of someone's life. In that a label like depression is, it has a narrative behind it. It has this kind of collective understanding that we can kind of look, we understand what depression feels like, what it looks like. And we have our own explanations for that. We have our own stories around what that felt like, what that looked like, that we can kind of draw on. So I think as everyone else has kind of said, it's not really about either or, but they're just different forms of kōrero, and we can look to Western models and look to their stories and how they make meaning of things like depression or schizophrenia or however they want to label it, and we can look, what are our interpretations, what are our stories that we have around these, and how do they resonate with whānau? And if this story resonates better with them than kei te pā, we can work with that. But if this story is actually more meaningful to them and resonates at a deeper level, then we can bring that one forward and work with that.
Kia ora, thank you. I think that's a really lovely way to kind of sum up the power and the benefit, I suppose, of and the potential healing that we can create when we look at some of the narrative or some of the whakapapa of the kōrero. We go back to some of what those kind of original meanings are, we deconstruct some of that. It's really exciting, so thank you for that. Lovely. We did just have one more pātai, and that was just, do you have any kōrero around stories of resilience or some of the potential that you've seen with our tauira during COVID?
I mean, I'm involved with lots of incredible students. I think, rangatahi are amazing in, the way that, they build networks and, they connect with one another. And, I really love seeing the ways that people looked after one another and like checked in on one another and been really open about where they're at. I think that's the biggest thing, is that, letting people know where you're at is such a courageous thing to do. And like saying that, I'm having a tough time right now. And when students have let me know that, things are going hard at home, or they're having to work more hours to support their whānau, and can they get extensions, or can I make extra time? Like, can I Zoom them to, so I can ask them questions about an assignment? Like, I love that. That's amazing, because reaching out for support is really hard sometimes, especially for young people. I know I didn't like doing that at all. I wanted to be independent. I wanted to like be my own person and just like have my own money and do my own thing. So any young person who was smarter than I was at that time, I love seeing that, because, we're social people, and, we love to connect. And sometimes the biggest thing, I guess the biggest sign of resilience is, being connected to other people and having people that that you can rely on and that rely on you. And I think that's been my biggest joy during lockdown, is seeing students who have really big barriers to getting through their studies and are still trying and still reaching out for support.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. Cool. Was there anything you guys wanted to add?
Yeah, so I'm obviously still only partway through my training and my registration at the moment, but one of the things we learn early on is around sort of teaching resilience and things like that. And all we simply say is resilience is the ability to bounce back from adverse situations. And boy, have our whānau shown that, like some beautiful examples from Logan. But I just think of some of the students I know and some of the things they're juggling, whānau who have lost jobs, maybe they've suddenly become the sole supporter. Maybe they're suddenly not sure if they want to study what they want to study, or if they finish their degree, is there going to be any career, any jobs to go into? And yet all these people sort of, pulling up their pants, pulling up their bootstraps, and just carrying on, just absolutely charging. So I think if there's one thing that I took away from not just the first lockdown, but the current lockdown, is, you can do whatever you want, but our whānau sort of gets back up every time. And not just gets back up, but gets back up gracefully, does so with manaakitanga, does so in a way, which really empowers people. And I think for me, that's the big bit. Is just we talk a lot about the challenges, and we don't talk about how well lots of our people have sort of met those.
Kia ora. Harry, is there something you'd like to add to
I would just quickly add that I think there's been a lot of hardship for people that were already experiencing a lot of hardship already, and that's just been exacerbated by COVID. And what I've seen from rangatahi is a huge amount of resilience and innovation as well, and not only for themselves, but also for their whānau, their nannies, their koros, and for their wider community as well as their peers. So yeah, just not on an individual level, but on that collective level as well, being really aware and serving their community. So very, very proud of the rangatahi I have around me.
Kia ora. Ngā mihi koutou. Really, really is a blessing to have you all here to share your kōrero tonight. Like I said, it's very refreshing to speak to the younger generation and to listen to your kōrero around, potential and resilience and what's, really happening on the ground for you guys, and, how that's impacting your own well-being, but also the relationships that you have. And it reminds me of just earlier before we came on tonight, I was talking to one of my very old best friends, and talking about what her kids did during lockdown, and they all kind of went home base. They're all moved out and they're all doing their own thing, and but during the lockdown, her son rang her up and said, "I'm coming home, Mum," and so he came home, and then her cousin came home, and they had 6 kids under the same roof, and the kids just gelled. They did it. They just moved in, and it was like, and these were kids who, one of the whānau was over in Australia for several years, but they grew up together, and it's that whakapapa connection, I think, that whanaungatanga, to be able to be with your cousins during that time is, it's kind of a blessed space to be in. When you think about the ways that you've been describing how you've had to connect socially via media, largely via media, because you don't have the ability to just be there and present with your cousins during some of these times because we're living across such vast distances. So really, again, demonstrates the ingenuity of your generation and the means that you have to maintain some of those relationships that you have, but also the diversity that you have in making sure that that you're maintaining your own well-being and your own needs. And so just just closing in a whakatauki that talks about the new generation coming through and the old generation retiring to a degree. So I'm excited to see the new ones coming through. But the whakatauki is ka pu te ruha, ka hau te rangatahi, the old net is cast aside and the new net goes fishing. And that's what you're doing. You're going fishing, you're doing the mahi. So doing the mahi, get the treats, I guess, eh? But it's really, really a blessing to have you fellas here. Thank you for your lovely kōrero tonight. If there's nothing else that anybody else would like to add, I think we might just close on there. Yeah.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. Mihi mahana, mihi aroha kia koutou I tēnei ko anō reira kia tau. Pauhihiri, paurarama, te apo I roto, marama I roto, tēnā te pau ko te pau ka iki, nā te pau ko te pau o inei kōrero, ka mā te ariki, ka mā te tauira, ka puta ki te whai au ki te amarama, hui te ora, hui te marama, haui e hui I, taiki.
Thank you.